everybody. Hey, how's everyone doing today? Pretty good? Well, thanks for joining me for our Animal Crossing New Horizons piano lesson. This is actually the fourth lesson in my series, my Learn With Me series, and I'm really happy to be here today. Hopefully you have your music already and you can join us. We will be tackling the Coda section of this piece, so it should be a fun challenge for today. But before we get started, if you don't mind hitting the share button, just letting everyone know that you're doing your piano. The second thing, of course, is if you haven't done so, go ahead and look for me on YouTube. You can search Izzy Chia, and you will find all of my piano lessons. So if you happen to skip one or be a little bit behind, that's okay. Everything is uploaded there, so you can watch at your own convenience. The third thing is I have a private Facebook group called Encore Music Makers. And I encourage you to join that group so that you can get some feedback from me on your piano practice. So if you're encountering some difficulty on a section, you can record yourself playing and post that video, and I'll provide you some feedback, okay? And of course, the last thing is, like I said before, if you haven't gotten your music, I encourage you to do that like now. You can search on musicnotes.com for Nocturn's arrangement of the Animal Crossing New Horizons theme, and that will bring up the music that we are currently working on. I think it's about $4.99, okay? All right, well, I guess we can get started, okay? All right, so let's see here. I have my music in my file folder, and I am seeing the Coda section over here on the second page. I'll show it to you guys. Here it is. There's the Coda. All right, so we're going to be working on that section today, okay? But before we start working on that specifically, I kind of want to have a baseline to see where we are in this lesson series. So I want to play through everything that we've currently learned, which is the first section, the second section where it drops the tempo just a bit, and then going back to the beginning for that da capo, okay? So let's see how that works out. All right, I'll switch to piano view. Okay, so this should be interesting. I got some good practice in yesterday, so let's see what happens, okay? All right, follow along if you can. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. That was pretty good. I'm proud of myself. I had a little bit of trip up in section 2, which I kind of anticipated because I think in my mind I had it that I was going to slow it down, but then my fingers kept going quickly. So I kind of got a little bit off track in terms of tempo. And as a result of that, I had a couple wrong notes. But that's okay. That's something that I can work on by consistently keeping my practice up in a way that gives me a little bit of adrenaline, right? By what I mean by that is sometimes I'll go on my private Facebook page and I will just go live, and I would sort of have a pop concert or a pop practice where just making myself a little bit nervous helps me understand how I react when I have a surprise audience. So that's actually something really good that you can do in your practice as well. But besides that, I think we did pretty good. I do, of course, for this lesson, we're going to be focusing on the coda section, okay? I didn't even get to the coda yet, but we will notice a few things that are different about the coda section, as well as some things that are similar in the coda section to our section 2. So let's dive in, okay? Okay, so the coda, the first thing that we need to mention is, what is a coda? Do you remember what a coda is from your piano instruction? Yeah, okay, so a coda is like another ending, an alternate ending. You know how you have that in like a movie or something? So the notation here at the second line, the end of the second line of page 2, this would be measure 6, 7, 8, 9, 29. It says DC al coda, okay? Now if we remember, DC stands for da capo, right? Da capo is referring to returning to the beginning, or the top, or the cap, da capo, right? And then al coda means that when you see the sign for the coda, if you look at page 1, the end of measure 13, you will see sort of like this little compass looking thing. It's a circle with the cross, in between, and it says to coda, okay? Now that notation at the end of 13 is telling you, flip back to page 2, and at measure 30, you will see the coda sign, okay? It matches symbols, right? And there, those last 4 lines are going to be considered the coda of this piece, okay? I hope that made sense. Let me show you what it looks like up here, okay? Here's the coda. You see it? Yes. Okay. So that's the section we're working on today. All right. So let's start just with the right hand, okay? There's a couple things to talk about with it because we're encountering a couple things that we haven't seen in the piece quite yet. We have some grace notes, and we also have hopping up an octave, and then we have a fermata up really, really high. So we'll get to that, okay? I'm going to switch to piano view, and we are going to go over just the right hand at measure 30, beginning with that staccato A, okay? You'll notice that it's very similar to that section 2 that we learned in lesson 2, but we have a few differences. So let's see what it sounds like, okay? I'm going to count off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. so that's the right hand section of this piece, okay? The coda section, if you noticed, you saw that the grace note at measure 31 is really different and interesting. It's not going to be one that takes up any sort of, let me switch here. It's not going to take up any sort of time as far as, you know, consisting of a half beat or a quarter beat or anything like that. It's literally just like an ornament that's added right before that third down to a third, okay? This is, I'm talking about measure 31, at the end of measure 31, okay? You see it goes like this, right? I'm not leaning on it. It's very quick. It's good to play it several times. Okay, it's going to sound a little bit rough at the beginning, okay? But I don't want you to try and practice this section without doing the grace note, because then you'll get used to playing it without the grace note. And that's not necessarily what the composer intended. We want to be able to include those ornaments to give it the style that they were trying to convey. So that's the right hand grace note section, right? We also have additional inverted chords, right? So we have our first inversion, F chord, sort of in the middle of measure 31, and then again at the measure 33, okay? This is different from how it was written in section 2, right? At measure 14, 15, 16, and 17. It was different there because it was just a sixth, right? But now we have the added C in there, the fifth tone, right? To give it that full first inversion one chord effect, okay? So let's try the right hand section once more, okay? All right, let's switch to piano view. Okay, so I'm going to count off and try your best to stay with me, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Tempo. Ritardando, nice and slow. Very good. Okay. So a few more things to mention here. You may have noticed that at measure 45, I'm actually playing measure 45 with my right hand, even though it's written in the treble staff that's notated for the left hand. That's sort of a personal preference. I found that I've been able to control the ritardando more with my right hand versus my left hand. But that's a personal preference. If you find that you have better control of that measure 45 ritardando that's notated and the arpeggiated chord, absolutely, by all means, you go ahead and do it with your left hand. I just prefer to do it with my right hand because it sets me up for measure 46, the final chord. So that's my preference, okay? Awesome. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I also didn't mention, at measure 35, everybody, you notice that giant A major chord, right? Right there at 35. That section measures 35, 36, 37, and most of 38. That section right there, if you did a really good job drilling it in section 2 from our second lesson, I'm looking at measures 19, 20, 21, and 22. It's exactly the same. I went through every chord and every notation and every tied note to see if there was anything different in those two sections. But comparing them, I found them to be exactly the same. So if you put the time in to drill that section, then you have this section at 35 to 38 perfect. Okay? So don't worry. That's one thing less to worry about for the coda. So if you did a diligent job practicing that section before, then you've got this section under your belt, okay? All right. The only thing that would be different would be at the end of that section, instead of playing the sort of the theme in the middle octave, we're going to be actually up an octave than what we were before. Right? And then we have the added 16th notes up an octave. I like that part. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting. It's sort of, it's like the cherry on top to this cute and peaceful song that we're learning, right? So that's the right hand. I don't really foresee any difficulty beyond just getting the meter right and getting the rhythm right in the addition of those grace notes, as well as the changing of the octave of the theme. So let's explore the left hand now, okay? Because the left hand, it might be the same or it might not be the same, but I want us to explore that together, okay? So let's switch to piano view. And we're going to start here at measure 30 with the coda, okay? And we're going to see if we can find any differences here. Now, quick reminder, remember my low E, I need to fix that key. So it might sound kind of funny, but don't be alarmed. That's just the way my piano sounds because I need to tune it. All right, so I'm going to count off. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Tempo. Right hand, bum, 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 bum. So there it is. All right, that was the left hand section. Okay, a couple things to talk about with the left hand. I noticed that I had a little bit of rhythmic confusion. I noticed that in my head I was counting eighth notes, which was fine. But then verbally I started counting full beats, like quarter notes, and that confused me. So I need to make sure that before I tackle counting out loud, I need to make sure that I'm doing it consistently throughout the whole section, okay? That's more on me as a teacher for you. But I find, again, this piece lends itself to counting the eighth note more easily than the quarter note because there are so many syncopated rhythms in there, you don't want to get lost. Okay, so looking here, I noticed the beginning section, line 1, line 2 of the coda. That it was very, very similar to section 2, right? We learned that in week 2 of this piece, right? So that's going back to like measures 14, 15, and all the way to 23. But it changes at the end of sort of like 38 to 39. There's a ritardando notated, right? So we have to be aware of that in our left hand, as well as a diminuendo, okay? So the diminuendo, as it's progressing through that measure 38, make sure that we're not playing our booming octave super loud. We don't want to do that, right? This isn't the song. There will be songs that we get to do that, but this isn't one of them, right? So just making sure that we're not overpowering the octave or the chords in the left hand so that we can carry that diminuendo and ritardando through to the end, okay? And then let's see. The last thing I want to mention is at 42. Okay, looking for your measure 42. Okay, at 42, you notice we have a tempo, and we also have the dynamic marking piano, of course, but the left hand staff, your grand staff, it's actually changes from bass staff notes to treble staff notes, okay? So you've got to be very, very cognizant of the fact that it has changed position, right? You're typically seeing your bass clef notated for your left hand, but in this case, they've injected that treble clef, so it's going to be changing the position of your hands, right? So be cognizant of that, all right? That affects everything all the way until the very last measure, okay? We're looking here at measure 46. That point is where your left hand returns to the bass staff, okay? You end with an octave F, okay? It sounds pretty wonderful, but just be aware of that. If you need to, take your pencil, right? You can circle these things. So I'm going to circle my last octave, as well as that treble clef notation for the treble staff at measure 42, okay? Let's see if we can play the left hand section once more, okay? This will be the coda. All right, so starting off, I will count off and we will see how we do, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I'm getting excited because I think it might be time to try and attempt this hands together. I'm not making any promises that it's going to sound good, but I like to do this as a teacher because it reminds the student that even teachers need to practice and even teachers make mistakes and we have to work at it, right? It's not like it just, magically poof, it's in my brain and I play it perfectly. No, that's not reality to me. What's real is being like a regular person and having to work at it, right? I've never claimed to be a virtuoso, but I do claim to be a good teacher, right? And I want to be able to work these things out with you in a way that is comfortable and accessible, right? So let's see what happens with the coda, okay? It might be okay, it might be not so great, but we still give it a try, okay? All right, let's give it a try. All right, wish me luck. Let's see how this goes. And I might bump down the tempo a little bit too because who knows what's gonna happen here. All right, let's count off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. okay. It wasn't perfect, but at least I know what I need to work on, right? So, yeah, definitely those grace notes, they really kind of sneak up on you. And they are just the little bit of, it's like adding that secret ingredient to your recipe. The grace note kind of really makes it like special in this Coda section. So that's definitely a section that I'm gonna have to work on. But I promise you I'll do my best to practice this week and get that under my fingers, okay? So practice goals for this week, everybody. We're gonna work on the Coda section, drill those sections that are gonna be tricky for you, okay? Try to keep it at that consistent tempo, okay? And then starting for next week's lesson, we're gonna be putting the entire piece together with the goal of bumping up the tempo, right? Because the tempo marking that's written is 102 to the quarter note. That's pretty fast. So we have work to do, okay? Awesome. Well, I'm really, really happy that we did this today. Quick reminder, I am accepting tips. If you find that these lessons are helpful and fun and engaging for you as a pianist, consider donating to my virtual tip jar. I accept PayPal. My email is encoremusichtx@gmail.com. My Venmo is Izzy Chia, and my Cash App is IZZI3CH3A. Okay, thank you for letting me say that. And last but certainly not least, every single lesson, like what are we on, like lesson 4 for this series, but it's probably like lesson 50. I always end with a music quote, okay? So today's music quote comes from the iconic jazz trumpeter and singer, Louis Armstrong. And this is what he says: musicians don't retire. They stop when there's no more music in them. That's true, right? It's like you could be like 90 years. I always see those videos, right, of like elderly people that played piano or they were musicians, and maybe they're going through something like Alzheimer's or dementia, but then you put them in front of their instrument or you turn on music, they remember everything. It's incredible, right? So they still have the music in them, right? It reminds me a lot of my great aunt. Her name was Maria Isabel Riddle, and she was a pianist, incredible pianist, from the border town of Eagle Pass, Texas. And as a Mexican-American woman and teacher, she certainly touched so many lives. And I think she gave her last piano recital and played like incredible Chopin and Beethoven and amazing pieces well into her 80s. So you can certainly say that she didn't retire. There was still music in her. So thanks again for joining me today. Practice. See if you can get some good time with the piano in. And join me next week for our 5th lesson in the Animal Crossing Learn With Me series. Okay? Take care. Bye.